Have you ever started playing a game that looks like an ordinary children's game, but the more you play it, the more you start to realize that you've stumbled across something much bigger? Now, let me tell you about a time when that happened to me. I was about 14 years old, sitting in my room, just me, my Nintendo Switch, and my under 18's debit card. Back then, every month my nan would send me £5 to it, and I could spend it on whatever I wanted. Back in the not so distant past when £5 could actually get you something. I didn't spend it on Shopkins like I used to. I'd grown out of buying them. I'd advanced to only secretly playing with them when I was by myself. Anyway, I was on my Switch and I had just completed Super Mario Odyssey. And I definitely wasn't advanced enough yet to tackle The Legend of Zelda. So, those were the only two games I had at that time, so I needed to get a new game. And that's when the Nintendo eShop comes in. And if you've ever scrolled through the eShop, you'll know it's a bit of like a mixed bag. You have like official games, like really polished titles, these mobile type games. And somehow in the middle of all of that, I found a game called Pikuniku. So, what were my first impressions of this game? When I first opened it up, I can't really remember what I was expecting or what was going through my mind, but when I was buying it, the screenshots and all the pictures made it look like a really simple, fun little game. It looks like the type of thing where you kind of buy it and you complete it in 5 minutes and then, you never play it again. But, it was worth it for those 5 minutes. But everything was kind of made up of these, basic shapes and there wasn't much detail. And I think after playing something like Mario Odyssey, maybe I was drawn to something simpler, like a 2D little game. But the main reason I think I clicked on it was this little guy. I've always been drawn to strange, slightly weird looking characters. And this one definitely qualified. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but I do remember it was on sale, which I think probably influenced my decision a lot. So I loaded the game up, and you start off waking up in this tiny little cave, and you're immediately introduced to your character, which is just a red thing. Like a little red bean thing with legs. There's no explanation of who you are, but that's it. That's your character. So you get introduced to the controls. You can jump, you can kick. There's this weird little move where your legs just disappear. And you realize pretty quickly that these are all the moves you have. You just kick things. That's it. And at first it feels a bit strange, when you're walking around. The controls feel a little weird. It's a little bit awkward. Not in a bad way, but walking feels a little bit clumsy, which is intentional. And, I think that's something I can relate to. I have the kind of ADHD clumsiness where simple tasks feel like full disasters. One time I tried to make my mum a coffee and I got the mug and then I got the instant coffee stuff, put it in the cup. Somehow I spilled it out of the cup and then I cleaned it up, put some more instant coffee in the mug again. I added the milk and the water and only spilled a little bit of water. And then I nearly tripped while carrying it to her. But for me, that's a pretty good attempt. That's quite good for me. Anyway, there's also the forgetfulness. I leave the freezer door open for no reason, and someone finds it, and anyway, back to the game. Almost immediately, this game is just fun. It is packed with personality. The thing that I think really stood out to me wasn't just the movement or the clumsiness, but the tone was a bit strange. Because in the first few minutes, you figure out this idea that people think you're a monster. You walk through the grass and you see these two fellas talking, and they're talking about this monster, and you walk to them and they look at you and think you're the monster. And there's all these folklore little things, rumors of a monster in a cave. So they're panicking and they think you're dangerous, and you're just standing there with no clue of what they're on about, because you're just this little walking jelly bean. But there's contrast where between how the game looks and then what it's actually telling you. And like, I think that's what made me realize this wasn't just some like random cheap game on the eShop. There was something like weird going on in this game. It's a bit deeper than I thought it was going to be, but I was completely hooked to it. I think for a little while, the game just kind of continues like that. You're interacting with villagers, you're still kind of confused on what's going on. You know, they thought you were a monster, then realized you're like not a monster. You're like solving these little puzzles, you're like helping the villagers, you're like kicking things you probably shouldn't be kicking. It all feels like really light and like harmless, and it's just like a nice little game. Anyway, in this game, there's like lots of side quests. There's like playing hide and seek with a rock. Um, I think that's the type of thing that I would actually like do in real life. Like run into a rock that wants to play hide and seek with me. Um, as you go, you talk to the villagers, and you know, through all these like conversations on all these places you're exploring, you keep on hearing about like this one company called Sunshine Inc. And at first, it like sounds like a good thing. They're like helping people in the community. They're like giving out all this money for free. You know, they're getting rid of the junk in the villages. And everyone is so happy. They're like stans of this company in like a suspicious way, like it's in like a too good to be true kind of way. So you start to look into it a bit more. And at that point, all the little cracks begin to show. You find out that people are like, you know, signing contracts for their like so-called rubbish to be taken away by the company. There are like some like surprise visits where like some villages like get chosen like for a free tour around, you know, the headquarters, which actually is in a volcano, which sounds like a typical villain thing. You know, that sounds like Gru from Despicable Me or like something like that. That just your headquarters being in a volcano, that is like a red flag. Like, you know that guy from The Incredibles? It kind of sounds like that, where he's like just on this like island. The villagers go to the company and then they just like don't come back, which that's kind of concerning. And suddenly this like bright, colourful little game is like hinting at something a lot darker. But I really like how it does this, because it's not like you get some like big dramatic reveal of, oh, this is like actually kind of messed up. It's just like little things. You get little hints, one little detail at a time. One weird comment here, one slightly concerning situation there. And then you realize this isn't some little puzzle game. Visually nothing changes. It still like looks so cartoonish and like it was made out of like paper cutouts. The characters are all these like cute little guys, but there's like this underlying like tension and like darkness, and you're not just like helping villagers anymore. You're like starting to question what's actually going on, what's the bigger picture here. And then you start getting like fully involved in it. You're like pulling off these shenanigans, like messing up the machinery, and you're like uncovering what the company is actually up to. And it turns out, surprise, surprise, they're not helping people at all. They're exploiting them. They're taking advantage of entire communities whilst pretending to fix their problems. And that's when it clicks. This game is not just like a weird little game about a red bean with legs. It's actually telling a story about control, manipulation, and people being taken advantage of. And it does all that without ever losing its sense of humor. And you're still like solving these like fun little puzzles, you're like kicking things around, you're still like moving in this like kind of confused like little noodle. But now there's like a actual purpose behind it. You're not just like a random confused noodle. You have like a purpose. You've got like a full-on situation to sort out. You have to change the world. And somehow that makes it all so much more satisfying. Okay, at this point of the game, you've probably like realized one thing. Sunshine Inc. is not what it says it is. On the surface, it presents itself as this like perfect company. It promises to make life easier. It offers people all this free money, and it gets rid of the junk clogging up the village that's just lying around. No one wants it there. It tells everyone that it's just there to help, and it says you can be perfect. And for a while, people are believing it. And they're like, wow, Mr. Sunshine Guy, he's so nice. Wish I could be besties with him. Wish I could go, like, be in his headquarters with him. But, why wouldn't you think that? If you were like this blob thing with legs and someone came to your village offering solutions to all your problems, you'd probably trust them too. But the more you look into it, the more you realize everything they're doing comes with a catch. The free money isn't really free. They're not really helping people, and the solutions they offer just create new problems. They're not trying to fix anything. They're trying to get people to become dependent on them. And one of the most unsettling things is how normal it all feels. No one's panicking. It's actually the opposite. People are happy about it. No one's questioning it. They're just happy. They're like actual like fans of Mr. Sunshine, and it's just like become part of everyday life for them, and I love that part because the game's not showing you some like over the top evil villain. It's showing you something much more believable. A system that looks helpful on the outside, but it's actually designed to only benefit itself. And what's interesting is the way the game presents it. You figure it out through like exploring the game, through small little details, seeing the way that characters interact with each other. And as the player, you're not just some like chosen hero and you don't have like special superpowers. You're just like a little red bean with legs. You're just like kicking things, accidentally falling over, falling down places, and like somehow you end up being the one who starts to disrupt it all. You're like sneaking into places, breaking their systems. You're like exposing what's really going down. And I think that's what makes the game so satisfying. You're not like in this like dramatic, like crazy, like Thanos battle. You're like slowly undoing everything they've built in the most like chaotic, clumsy way possible. You're like working with these worm fellas and like, I don't even know. I love the contrast because you've got this like genuinely like deep thing about like control and like manipulation, but you're just like going around kicking things and like eh, being really clumsy, and just it is, I really love it. But before we go any deeper into this, it's probably good to actually talk about what happens, like aka the plot of it, because the story kind of sneaks up on you. At the start, you don't even realize this game has like a proper storyline. It just feels like you just like wake up in a cave and like the villagers think you're a monster, and then like they realize you're not a monster because you're like not a monster, and instead of being the villain, you end up just helping them. And at first, all these little like lore drops are very small. You like meet a few villagers to help out with like some simple problems, like drawing a face on a scarecrow, and then you're just like exploring even more, and like it all feels like really calm and relaxing. But as you explore more, the world starts to open up. You meet different characters, each having their own situations. A lot of those problems, though, start to link back to this thing called Sunshine Inc. And at first, it's really subtle. People start talking about like local resources being taken. People keep on talking about being given free money. There's like little ways where this like company is involved in everyday life. Then it starts to escalate. You discover that Sunshine Inc. is setting up systems that control entire communities. They're not helping, they're reconstructing how everything works. They send machines to like come and take and manage resources. People are sent off to the headquarters, which again is in a volcano, which is a red flag. Like, why would you go? But everything's being framed as this like positive thing, something that's like helpful to them. But the more you get involved, the more things feel off, and like you realize this isn't what it seems to be, and that's when you start pushing back. And eventually, all this leads back to one person, Mr. Sunshine, the guy behind it all, the one presenting this idea of a better world, whilst quietly building a system where everything is controlled. And by the time you reach that point, the game has completely shifted. You're not just helping people with small problems anymore. You're actively working against something much bigger. An entire system that presents itself as good, but actually is the complete opposite. What's interesting is this game never suddenly changes into this. It's just slow, small, simple moments. And that gradual shift is what makes everything hit harder, because you don't realize how deep it goes until you're already in the middle of it. So at this point, we understand what Mr. Sunshine is doing. He's trying to create a world that he controls, where everyone thinks they're happy, where he can micromanage literally everything. But the question is, why is he doing this? Because it seems like he's not being greedy just for the sake of it. He's trying to build something, a better world, something controlled and predictable. And that kind of thinking usually comes from somewhere. Now, the game doesn't give us a full backstory on this person. There's no big explanation or emotional cutscene telling us exactly who he is and what happened to him. But it does give us subtle little hints. I like the part where you're in the underground with the worms. You go through the area and you come across something that feels weird. You see almost the remains of his people, not in a graphic way, but you see enough to realize something happened, and it looks like they got wiped out or something happened to them. And that kind of makes it a bit more unsettling, because now instead of seeing Mr. Sunshine as someone controlling a system just for the sake of it, you start seeing that he probably is just trying to replace something that he lost. He seems like the last of his people, and that changes the way you view him, because suddenly it doesn't feel like greed or someone who just wants everything just for themselves. He's trying to create this world where the kind of loss he experienced can't happen again. A world where everything is managed, everything is predictable and safe. But in doing that, he goes way too far, because a world without uncertainty is also a world without freedom. And that links back to how he behaves throughout the game. Everything he does is structured and carefully controlled. Nothing is left to chance. And from a psychological point of view, that often comes from a fear of things being out of your control, not having control over previous situations that harmed you or maybe the people around you. And he has a need to make sure nothing unexpected can happen again. So instead of accepting the world the way it is, he tries to change it. He builds systems, he creates this new world. He turns something human into something controlled and artificial. And there's also something else going on. He doesn't just want control, he wants to be the solution. This creates this cycle where, there's a problem, he offers so-called solutions, people start depending on him, and that dependence gives him complete control. And, it seems like he wants a purpose, to feel necessary, to feel like he's holding everything together. Because if everything is dependent on you, nothing can fall apart without you noticing. And maybe that's the point. Maybe he's trying to build a world where nothing can fall apart ever again. But in doing that, he creates something just as harmful in a completely different way. Because when you control everything, when you try to remove all unpredictability, all the messiness, all the individuality of life, you don't end up with a perfect world. You end up with something completely artificial. And maybe it would look right on the surface, but underneath, it's very wrong. And in Pikuniku, this idea doesn't just stay theoretical. It literally turns into this. The artificial sunshiners. These are like weird manufactured like little creatures. They're all the same. They're like all controlled, all part of this system. And I love it because it's such a simple way of showing the end result of his thinking. Like you've got all this like psychological stuff going on and this like need for control. And it just leads to whatever this is. Just like these little guys. There's like no personality. They're just like things, and it's just kind of funny because after all that analysis, the final result of his master plan is these little creatures and this like weird little society. And I don't know why, but that goofiness just fits so perfectly into this game. Okay, after everything we've just talked about, the corrupt systems, all the control, the psychological stuff, you'd expect Pikuniku to feel like this like really like deep, heavy game. But it just doesn't. And that's, I think, because of the humor of it. This game is just constantly funny, and I like how it's funny because it's not really relying on like big jokes or like long bits of dialogue. Most of the humor just comes from like existing in this world. Like the way your character moves, you're not like walking normally. You're like kind of wobbly and like stumbling, and the legs aren't like fully like cooperating properly. You try to do something like jumping, but you're like wobbly. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And then there's like the kicking, because that's the main thing you do in this game. Like, you just like kick things. You solve problems, you just kick them. You explore by kicking things. And you like cause problems by kicking things. And it just never stops being funny. And I think the main reason that the humor works so well is just the contrast of it. You've got this like goofy little game, but with this just like deep like lore and story and like psychological like type thing. And I think it just makes it so much better. It just makes the humor makes the heavier moments easier to process, and the deeper story becomes funny, and it's not just random jokes, but you're laughing because you're like slowly realizing what's going on. And I feel like this game never takes itself too seriously. Even all of the serious moments in it still feel like playful. Like at one point you're like literally trying to prove yourself to a secret rebel group, but I mean that sounds really serious, and like you'd expect like some like intense mission or like a test of like skill or something, but instead you have to prove you're legit by like challenging a robot to a dance battle. And like it makes the game so good. You go like in these deep situations and you're like, okay, things are getting serious, and then you have to just like do a dance battle, and it doesn't ruin how deep the lore is, but it makes it like more memorable. And it just like it is great because it reminds you that even though the game is dealing with bigger problems, it keeps that sense of humor. I think my like favorite part of Pikuniku is when you go through the Sunshine Inc. headquarters, because I think this is where like everything that has been building like comes together. Up until this point, you've been seeing little bits and pieces of what the company is doing. There's like loads of little hints that like this company is not what it seems. Little things that just feel like a bit off. And the headquarters is where all of that comes together. You like see what like the actual plan is. It's both exactly what you'd expect but also not what you'd expect. Everything is like controlled and structured, and it seems like everything has been designed to run perfectly. You see all this robots, and Mr. Sunshine is the only one there that like isn't a robot. It all feels really intentional. Everything is just micromanaged, and if anything goes wrong, he literally like starts having a tantrum and like acts like a toddler. And this like section is just really fun gameplay wise. You're like sneaking around, solving puzzles, messing with things you probably are not supposed to touch. And it almost feels like you've gone from being this slightly confused character to this like spy character who's actively trying to take this whole system down, but in like the most goofy way possible. You're not doing anything like crazy dramatic, but you're just like kicking things, pressing buttons, moving things around, accidentally on purpose causing chaos. And I think that's why this part stands out so much to me. It just perfectly captures what this game is about. You're just disrupting things in like the funnest ways, and it just all works really well. And it's the point where everything you've learned kind of comes together. You understand what Sunshine Inc. is doing, you see how this all fits with the bigger game, and you realize just how much control they actually have, which makes it really satisfying to break it. And even though this is one of the more serious parts of the game, it doesn't lose that humor. You're still moving really goofily and you're still just this confused noodle. But I don't know, it's so fun to play. And, this is the part where everything's been building up to. So, after all of that, is there anything I would change about this game? And to be honest, I don't think there is. I don't think I would change anything about this game. I absolutely love this game. I love the lore, the silliness, and the music. I haven't mentioned the music, but it is really, really good. But there is one thing. I wish there was just more of it, because it just ends so much sooner than I would have liked. And not like it doesn't feel like it was rushed or anything, but I don't feel like I'm ready for it to be over, which is probably a good problem to have for a game, but it does really leave me wanting something else, which is a sequel. So, if there ever was a sequel to this game, there are a few things I'd want to see from it. So, the first is the obvious one, which is I'd like the story to continue. We spend just the whole game taking down Sunshine Inc. and breaking the system, exposing everything, but we don't get to see much of what happens after. What does the world look like now? How do these communities rebuild? What replaces like where that company was? I'd love to see that idea explored properly, and that's like a really interesting part of the story that we don't get to like fully see. I think the second thing I'd want from a sequel is I'd want to learn more about the idea of Piku being a beast, because at the very start of the game, you're seen as this like crazy monster, and there's this like folklore kind of thing where about this like beast that lives in a cave, but I want to know why it's there, because where does the idea come from, and why does Piku have no idea what it is and where it comes from? It's like we only got a little glimpse of it, so I'd like to see that idea explored more. And then there's Niku. If you've ever played the co-op mode, you know what I mean. Niku is like basically another Piku but yellow. So the co-op mode, this part of the game is really fun, but it's like a side thing. It's not part of the actual like main game. But I'd love to see that change. I'd want Niku to be actually part of the main story. Or maybe he has his own version, or I don't know if it's a he, but just not just a side mode, but like properly included. And I think it could add a lot to it, more opportunities for those like weird, funny little moments that the game does so well. And also, I just like the idea of there being more than one of you. I think, you'd get to see a different side of the game. Because, I don't know, for such a simple looking game, there's still so much there that we could explore. So, yeah, it's kind of funny that this all started with like £5. Just me like sitting in my room at 14, scrolling through the eShop. I didn't expect much from this game, but it was so much more than I thought it was going to be. Like, it's a game where you're just like a red bean with legs kicking things, which at first seemed something that was going to be a simple game. But the more I played it, the more I realized how deep this story was. And when I think back on it now, it's not just the big ideas that stick with me. It's like the small, like weird little moments, like the side quests. Like Toastopia, I didn't even touch on that. That is such a good part of the game. There's the dance battle. There's those like all these strange little creatures you meet along the way. And there's loads of moments where you're not really sure what's going on, but it's just so fun. And all these like weird, quirky little moments, like mixed in with this just bigger story about this like company that controls everything. It just comes together and creates such a good game. And the only thing I don't like about it is that there isn't more of it. So yeah, have you ever played this game? Or have you ever had like a game like this where you kind of just randomly brought it and it turned out to be like this crazy deep game that, turned into one of your favorites? Thank you for watching. Bye.